Hello folks, welcome back to World War II TV and yet another impromptu Ask Me Anything. I cannot get Caroline Moorhead's technical problems sorted out. She will be back at some point. Don't know what's going on. She seems to be in the platform, but I can't see her, so we'll get that rescheduled. So here I am to talk about whatever you want to talk about, really. But let's start off with accessing of old content on the channel, because when I started this 4 years ago now, I had no idea that I would get to a point where I'm pushing, as I am now, 1,500 separate shows on this channel, which when I say it, it just seems insane that I have done that many. It's absolutely crazy. You know, I don't know what, I can't believe I have done that many. But one of the issues with YouTube is its rather clunky system of indexing content. Okay, so the system we're all stuck with is playlists. Okay, so when you go to my World War II TV page, one of the menu options is playlists, and there they get listed, and I have them under categories. So there are countries in World War II, which under that subheading are the playlists for Canada. Oh, and by the way, happy Canada Day. See how I seamlessly did that link there. And you would have Poland, and you would have Italy, and etc., etc., etc. Then there are kind of campaign playlists like the Pacific, Eastern Front, D-Day and Normandy. Then there are unusual or sort of specific weeks like famous people, leaders and leadership. We've done spies weeks and things like that. And most shows are listed under more than one type of heading. So this Ask Me Anything is only going to be under the Ask Me Anything playlist. But the last Ask Me Anything I did, which was about D-Day and the 8th anniversary, is also under the D-Day and Battle of Normandy playlist, because it makes sense to put it there. Okay, so my advice is, if you're new to the channel, or if you're not that new but you haven't yet really delved into the back catalogue, playlists are your best and only option for finding that content. The search function also works. One of you asked in the sidebar earlier about doing content about Ukraine in World War II, so I tried putting Ukraine in the search box, and various shows in which Ukraine has been mentioned do pop up there. But it's not like Google. It's not you know, where you can kind of see a list of things like that. It's a little bit clunky. So my advice is just spend some time there and kind of find out what we do. The other thing to look at is also when you go back and watch a show, cards will come up. Now I'm explaining how YouTube works. Cards are those little links that appear in the top right. So where's my camera? There, kind of where the logo is. And they will give you links to other shows and also the merchandising, so you can help support World War II TV by buying a snazzy t-shirt or a mug or whatever it would be. But links to the playlists that are appropriate for that show will come up. So if it was a D-Day and Battle of Normandy show, it may list the playlist for that subject, D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. Then at the end of the show, when I finish up, I leave that screen with 2 spaces for links. That's another way of finding out shows that I think connect to the subject we've just done. So, for example, if we did a show about resistance in Poland, the link at the end might take you to another show we have done about a similar subject, maybe resistance elsewhere, or another show about resistance in Poland, etc., etc., etc. So there are various ways of finding out. Oh, and in the shows themselves, in the description, and the description is always your friend, folks. For example, when Prit Buttar was on last week, I will list all the previous shows that he was in the menu there as well, or someone like Steve Zaloga. And at the top of the description, it'll say, this is a part of the, let's call it the Monte Cassino and Beyond playlist. And there is the link in the description to the other shows in the Monte Cassino and Beyond playlist. So there we are. So that's kind of how to find the old content there, but it isn't the most perfect system. No system for indexing is the most perfect system. And what happens is that when shows recede into the past, I don't necessarily always remember to add them to a playlist that I have since created. So, for example, Paul Baville will be on tomorrow evening. I haven't done the graphic yet. He is going to be the second guest in my How to Be a Historian series The first was with the wonderful Alex Churchill. And so Paul will be on tomorrow talking about the work he does podcasting, the work he does with living history, the events he does around the UK, and how he conveys history to people. But there might be old shows that probably could fall under that category that I have yet to add to the playlist. Does that make sense? Ian is saying, I do have difficulty searching for shows I have not viewed. You can just go to the option where under videos, it will say you have the option for, but that doesn't work for live, I don't think. It should have you give you the option for popular, oldest and newest, and ones you haven't seen, theoretically should come up. But I say it's just, it's not perfect. The system is not, it is what it is. We're stuck with how it is. But it does mean that sometimes people discover kind of randomly content that they didn't know about when my beard was less grey and a bit longer during lockdown, that kind of thing. So, or you might find something that you didn't even know we covered, which brings me to the next point I want to make, which is about how we cover subjects on this channel. Okay, so I am the host. Hello, I'm Paul Woodadge. This is my channel. But I always have a guest on. So when people propose subjects, my quest then is to find someone who is willing to talk on that subject, because I don't do the research myself. I could do the research and I could put together the odd video that I have done the research on. But my system is, and I think this is what makes World War II TV so particularly good, if I may say so, is what's the point of me going and getting all my books on the Pacific campaign about submarines when I can bring James M. Scott on, who has written one of the definitive books about, for example, American submarines in the Pacific? That's the way it works. I bring on the right person for the subject, and then they talk about it, and then I ask intelligent or sometimes less than intelligent questions on behalf of you, the viewers, and then we put your questions to them as well. So the subject, for example, of Ukraine came up, and I'm sort of trying to saving some of your questions to do later on. Where is it here? Do you think there is still a place on a channel to talk about the history of Ukraine in the Second World War? Well, absolutely. But it would mean finding someone. And here's the next thing. I try and find people with a vested interest, i.e. they're from the area we're talking about. Now, right now, of course, Ukraine is not a particularly pleasant place to be, most of it there. So I'm assuming that the Ukraine-based historians have got better things to do right now than talk to me about the history in World War II, in that they're fighting for their survival. But let's use an example like, for example, the Philippines. So I've done 2 Philippines at War weeks on World War II TV. The first, I think, had 6 programs, and the second had 5 or 6 programs. Now, all bar, I think, 2 of those 12 guests, it may have been 13, maybe even been 11. My memory is not perfect, but all bar 2 of those guests were from the Philippines. So that's very important to me. So, for example, one of the things I get a bit frustrated about is the difficulty finding French guests, for example. Now, I live in France. If you didn't know that, I live in Normandy. And what tends to happen is I just reach out to French historians. They either don't reply, or I can't get through to them, or the email comes back undelivered, or they just say no, or various other things like that. I don't know why. It may be an uncomfortable speaking in their second language. I don't know. But I can only put the feelers out. The other subject I so want to do, and some of you have been with me a long time will know that I've tried to get this off the ground several times without yet success, is a week or 2 where we really, really look at Yugoslavia in World War II. Now, I could bring on people like Peter Caddick Adams, who spends most of his year in Croatia, to talk about Yugoslavia in World War II. There have been other British, American authored books about the struggle in Yugoslavia in World War II, and I'm sure they would add to our understanding of the campaign. But if and when I do a Yugoslavia week, I will want to speak to historians from Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Moldova, and spreading around the Balkans area, not just Yugoslavia, but the countries nearby. Even Turkey comes into the story about the Balkans. Now, this is the difficulty. It seems as fast as I make contact with people and say, would you be interested to go on my channel, I either lose contact, or when they find out I'm inviting people from the other countries on, they say, oh, I'm not sure that I want to be on if you're going to give if I'm representing this country, I don't want you to necessarily give a voice to the person from the other country, because the problem with Yugoslavia and the Balkans is that the wounds run deep. I mean, the area still has its issues and border issues and problems between the countries. And, we go back to the 90s. So it's one of those subjects that I would really love to do, but I have not yet managed to get enough guests. I've got 2 or 3 who are happy to do it, but I want to do a couple of weeks. And what's happened since my plan to do a Yugoslavia week is we got ourselves to the 80th anniversary of 1943 last year and 1944 this year. And although there were lots of things happening in Yugoslavia in 1944, there were lots of things happening elsewhere in the world. So as you notice, I've been trying to do my Monte Cassino weeks, my Battle of Normandy weeks, the Bagration week last week. There'll be more Eastern Front stuff coming up later in the year. There'll be more Pacific War stuff. So it's likely that if and when I get a Yugoslavia week off the ground, it probably won't be till the second part of 2025 or maybe even 2026. So if you are out there and you have an idea for a subject for the channel, the way to do it is to propose to me the expert on the subject rather than the subject. I get people saying you should cover this book here, and the author of the book died 20 years ago. Well, my Ouija board skills are not quite up to speaking to dead historians. So I kind of have to work with the living ones. So, think about the guests. Think about when you happen to stumble across a podcast or a C-SPAN lecture or another YouTube tutorial, you think, oh, that guy, that woman is really interesting talking about this. Suggest the person rather than the subject. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense to you all. So let's go through some of your questions and stop giving me loads and loads of them. I don't intend to be here all day, but I will go through some of the ones that I can see I've already saved. So so there, case in point, and welcome to our viewer from, I think it's from Warsaw. So yeah, we have done various shows about the Polish in World War II, and also shows that are about what happened in Poland without necessarily featuring Polish units per se. So we did a show with Conrad fairly recently about his grandfather's journey with the Polish armor in Italy. We've got a show with Paul Woodadge, who is a senior lecturer at Sandhurst, Polish obviously by birth. He'll be covering the relationship between General Anders and General Leese and the various other Allied commanders as they push towards Monte Cassino. That's towards the end of July. I've been trying to get Paul down, but he's very busy for a number of months. That's coming up later this month. We have done with Jenny Grant. We talked about General Sosabowski at Arnhem. We've talked about the Polish Commando Unit, etc., etc. So we have covered Poland before in terms of their units that fought alongside the Allies. We've also covered in various forms the uprising, resistance generally in Poland. We've talked about Warsaw specifically. We've talked about the German efforts to kind of push into Warsaw. We've talked about the 1940-41 era. So it's a subject I like to return to. And if you notice, when I cover Poland on the channel, it is either with someone like Alexandra Ritchie, although she's Canadian. Happy Canada Day again. Another shameless opportunity to say that. She has been living in Poland for the last, whatever it has been, 2 or 3 decades. So she's just about as Polish as you can get. Jenny Grant, who is British, but her family is Polish, so when she comes on, she gives that unique Polish slant. Conrad, who was on recently, his grandfather was Polish, so that I bring people on with that connection. Okay, so there is plenty of Polish. Again, the playlists are what you should use to find out about that. So interesting question again from our viewer there about which organization tactics of World War II underground makes the biggest impression on me. But I wonder why you said to exclude the Yugoslavian Tito partisans there, because they're very interesting. The offensives in Yugoslavia I find fascinating, and I was in Jablanica 2 years ago, which is the bridge over the Neretva River, where a very, very important partisan battle took place. There was the film made in the 1960s with Yul Brynner and Orson Welles, which is a bit hokey, but kind of covers it from a, albeit slightly communist bias point of view. So the Yugoslavian partisans intrigue me a lot, although you get to the point where are they actually now partisans? When you get to a certain size and you're fighting directly as an army, are you still partisans, or are you in fact an unofficial army, whereas in Italy, and that would be the show with Caroline, partisans are genuinely small groups of people who hide in the hills and go and do stuff. The same would apply to France. The Polish home army in Poland, is that, at what point does it become big enough to be able to be classed as an army? So that brings up the subject of how many people do you have to have in a partisan organization for it to remain a partisan group and before it becomes an army, albeit a civilian one, like the Soviet partisans, for example, that came up last week in the Bagration series. A lot of the Polish the Russian and Soviet partisans who are supporting the Red Army pushing west were people who had been cut off, or they'd escaped from the Germans and they were kind of behind the lines, who then rejoined the Red Army as it pushes through. So they had been the Red Army, then they spend a period when they're in the partisan movement, and then they join the Red Army again. So are they really ever partisans, or are they behind the lines Red Army guys? These are all rhetorical questions to which there is no particular answer. Let me plow through a few more questions. I haven't seen the Czech film Tobruk, but I'm aware of it. I just haven't got round to watching it. I'll get to there one day. Robert Rood is asking a couple of movies that I like that came out after 2000, if any. So I did like the movie done by my friend over in Hawaii about the 442nd and the 100th Battalion of volunteers there, which was called, and I forget what it's called now, but go back and find the interview with her. I will try and find out what it is while I'm talking to you. So that was about the Japanese, Nisei and Hawaiian troops who fought. Someone remind me what the film is called. It came out about 10 years ago. I like that. I mean, Inglourious Bastards, does that count? I like that, Inglourious Bastards. I actually think The Great Raid with Benjamin Bratt and was very good, although it didn't get the big global success. What else have I liked? I mean, Jojo Rabbit. Is it a war film? Is it kind of, well, yes, I really like Jojo Rabbit. I wasn't so keen on Hacksaw Ridge, if I'm being brutally honest. For me, it was too, the religion was too thickly running through it for my personal tastes. But yeah, I tend to prefer the older movies, but that doesn't say that the modern ones. I quite like the Operation Mincemeat one recently with Colin Firth. It was all right. It kind of overcooked the story a little bit about the agent and the body and the what have you. But I like the way they told the story of that subterfuge. I just think they kind of overplayed the success it had. That's all right. There's quite a few. Ryan, which country had the most well-organized underground resistance? Well, I mean, that's, how do you measure these things? The most organized, productive. All the countries that get resistance movements end up with that difficulty of there being different factions fighting for slightly different reasons. It happens in the Philippines, it happened in France, it happened in the Soviet Union, and after Barbarossa, it happened in Italy. It happened in Poland. That's the thing about being called up, conscripted into an actual national army. You get told you are in that unit. You become a member of the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada or the British Grenadier Guards, or whatever it would be. Resistance units are often, they're led by personalities. They're based on the region. They're based on, it's kind of like local politics compared to national politics in a way. So, they all to some extent struggle with the organizational thing. And even though the French resistance was officially united as one by the time you get to June the 6th and Operation Overlord, it still had its issues. And it reminds me of the scene in Life of Brian, the Monty Python film, when we're the Judean People's Front. No, we're the People's Front of Judea. Where's the Popular People's Front? He's over there. That kind of thing is, you end up with these factions that have different aspirations. And it's look at how the world is today, with that we agree on lots of things, and as a species we disagree on lots of things. So getting people to unite and fight under one banner is always very, very hard. Which Pacific battlefield would I like to visit most? Any of them, frankly, Charlie, though I wouldn't mind going off to where the LRDG that you talk about and study fought out in North Africa. But I think Peleliu, possibly Tarawa. I can't get to Iwo Jima because I'm British. They wouldn't let me there. They only let Americans, and that's only one, well, and Japanese, of course, and that's only one day a year. Okinawa, maybe, but I find the whole story a bit tragic. Saipan, Guam, possibly. Guadalcanal, definitely. New Guinea, Kokoda. I was offered the chance of going out to Kokoda and New Guinea and Guadalcanal this October, but it clashed with the World War II TV tour I'm running. So I will try and do that at some point, although funding becomes an issue because I'm only a poor YouTuber. I don't have huge amounts of money. But there's lots of Pacific battles. I haven't been to any of them. Or the Philippines. I'm really planning to go to the Philippines at some point in the reasonably near future. All of them. I haven't been to any of them. So in Burma, I suppose, Myanmar, all of them, or India, all of them, all of the above. Have I ever considered inviting Timothy Snyder? I have sent a message to Timothy Snyder's people, and I can't remember what happened. I either got a no or I didn't get a reply. I can't remember. I feel I got a no, but it might have been just not a reply. The thing about Christopher Browning is he's not the youngest. He's 80, I think, now. But I mean, I could reach out to him. I don't know that he does podcasts, but it's worth asking. I will make myself a mental note of doing that. Okay, so let me scroll back through some of your messages and comments and see if I can find some good questions there, and even maybe not some good questions, maybe some terrible questions, but they're worth asking and answering. So let me go through again. Talk among yourselves. Well organized. And Great Dominion is reminding me it is also Memorial Day in Newfoundland and Labrador, and blah, blah, blah. Goes back to the July the 1st, first day of the Somme and the Battle of Beaumont Hamel. Very good point. Thank you for sharing that, Great Dominion. Tonnet, well, World War II TV is like a box of chocolates. I can't do a Tom Hanks. I'll stick to my Churchill. Or who did I do the other day? Who was I doing quite well, reasonably? Wasn't Montgomery, was it? Montgomery, just drop your R's. Montgomery, your wowdy wabble of regular viewers here on World War II TV. That's how to do, Monty. Just drop your R's. Hi, Yost. We do need a better system. Could you teach about research methods? Yeah, research. That's a very good question, Veronica. Research widely, basically. Don't discount any source. And I should make it clear that there are academic ways of being qualified as a historian, and there are non-academic ways of becoming a historian. I took the non-academic route, which is longer and more strewn with rocks and difficulties. The academic route is possibly more expensive, but possibly swifter, but maybe more specific and honed to a particular thing. This is really interesting. I mean, it's you've got to kind of decide. With World War II, it's a massive subject, right? So you need to kind of think about, you're talking about looking into nursing, kind of starting in an area that's manageable and kind of getting to grips with that, and not run around like a kid in a candy store and just, oh, that looks interesting, because it is a massive subject. I've been studying World War II since I was in my teens and younger, in fact, so well over 40 years. I've got 2,000 plus books. I've got thousands of megabytes, hundreds of gigabytes of archives on my computer, more than I would ever be able to read if I lived to be 200 years old. So learning how to work out what is good and bad takes time. When you're looking at a book, because obviously secondary sources are very important. Look at the bibliographies, look at the acknowledgements, look at the thank yous, look at how the sources are cited. There are some World War II books that don't have any kind of bibliography, any kind of citations at all. Others have lots and lots of them. Look at peer reviews, look at how things get just, reviewed by other people. Don't take oral histories at face value. Always corroborate, always double check, because oral histories, ask any criminologist, ask any lawyer, ask any policeman. Eyewitness accounts are notoriously the least accurate way of determining who's innocent or guilty in a crime. So oral histories are a potential minefield, but of course incredibly useful. We can't write about World War II without including the voices of those who were there, but they can be muddied. People will misremember things. They get things confused. So it's a long process. There are courses. Probably my best advice would be to skip the long path I took and actually go and take a study. So in the UK, for example, there's the wonderful war studies course at Wolverhampton, which is very, very good. There are online courses. You can do the National World War II Museum in New Orleans that do various online courses where you can study things. So do Wolverhampton do online courses. I think History Hit does some online stuff. There are various ways of getting taught how to discern, how to do, if you like, critical thinking. So, yeah, it's a good question. There you are. That David is saying that the system of having knowledgeable guest speakers works smashingly. So that's the plan. It also means I don't have to learn everything because I couldn't possibly learn. Several questions for you. Don't you think Turkey was a missing link and a necessary element to Operation Barbarossa? Well, the whole Balkans Turkey thing becomes part of the Barbarossa story because Barbarossa was delayed because of various reasons, including what was going on in Yugoslavia, Turkey's neutrality, which we have done a show on with probably 3 years ago now about Turkey's role in World War II. Yes, the Balkans, that whole area is an underappreciated, understudied, under-talked about on YouTube because it's very, very complicated. But discussing what those countries bordering the Aegean, bordering the Black Sea and Red Sea, what they were up to and how that impinges and affects the rest of the war, very, very important stuff. I'd love to do more about that on the channel in the future. What's the best way to follow the path of the role that Ulster Rifles took on D-Day and beyond? Which battalion, first or second? First, so the airborne, you start at the drop zone and then move up to Breville where they were. But the war diaries, if it's the airborne you're studying, the Pegasus archives online have the war diaries, I think they're of the 1st Battalion, so you can follow them, including coordinates of where they were. 2nd Battalion, there's the book, The Rifles Are Here, I think it's called. You can buy from the museum in Ulster. Basically, it's Sword Beach into Combon Plain via Galmanche, and then after Combon Plain, it's Operation Charnwood into Caen, and then after Charnwood, they kind of are involved on the periphery of Operation Goodwood, so pushing up towards Troarn, and then they kind of, I think they're involved on the periphery of Blue Cope. I tend to lose interest in the Royal Ulster Rifles after my great uncle got wounded in early August. Not lose interest, but that's where my own personal knowledge goes. How can you find official records of a clandestine World War II operation? Well, it depends which nation we're talking about, which clandestine operation. There are not that many still classified documents from World War II now. So, for example, SAS, most of their stuff is online now. Most of the MI, various archives from World War II, most of them are available, not necessarily online. You may have to go to the National Archives in Kew to get the British ones. In America, you may have to go and apply for them at NARA, but it depends which operation. But it does raise the question of the fact that sometimes within families, stories get exaggerated and people are, I'm not accusing you of this, but people think that their relative was involved in something far more clandestine. And it's the case, the standard thing you hear these days when people talking about stolen valor, and people get called out who are claiming they were a Navy SEAL or they were SAS on the balcony in London in the embassy, and when they don't appear in lists, the pretend veterans, yes, well, everything I was doing was off the record. It was all black ops. You won't find it listed. So when any story is presented to you, so this connects with Veronica's questions about researching. If anyone presents to you a story of, well, there's nothing been written down about it, you can't find anything out about it, it's so secret, there's nothing written on it, be very wary. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying be very wary, because most things have now been written about with World War II. I'm not saying things have been written about with regards to Desert Storm or Afghanistan, but World War II, the great majority of archives have been released. So there's not much in the way of clandestine, covert, behind the scenes stuff that hasn't been written about now. So the chances are whatever it is you're investigating has already been written about. And if it hasn't been written about, you need to kind of consider, did it really happen, or is this a story that has kind of done the rounds and been kind of exaggerated over the years? So there we are. Question for you. I'm in America. I've been saving up money for a trip to Normandy. I'm not there yet. Is there travel agents or group you recommend to sightsee? Well, go to my my tour guide website, ddayhistorian.com. I'll put the link up. I'll try and find it for you. I don't do much guiding myself, but on my links page, there is a list of other guides I recommend, but that's for private tours. There are also, I've just put the link in the sidebar there. There are also groups. There are groups based in Normandy that you can take a tour when you get here, or there are groups that come from America and bring, do the whole thing with you, like the National World War II Museum in New Orleans do tours, National Geographic do tours in the Britain, Ledger do fantastic bus tours. There are all sorts of organizations that bring people over. It depends on how long you want to spend, what budget you have. Do you want to be part of a group? Do you want a private tour? Do you want to focus on the battles of just one nation? Do you want to cover all the nations? How far into Normandy do you want to go, etc., etc., etc.? Which Black Watch, Jamie? There are numerous battalions of the Black Watch in World War II. The Black Watch was one of the ones that had, from memory, I think they had something like 8 battalions. Durham Light Infantry had like 15 in World War II, but there are numerous battalions of the Black Watch, and there were 2 types of Black Watch. There are the Canadian Black Watch and the Scottish Black Watch. It depends which one you are. I haven't done anything specifically on the Black Watch, but they have maybe come up in the subject matter. But you'd need to be precise about which battalion and which unit and at what time in the war. Do you feel that there was a lack of Japanese World War II historians? Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, no. There are various reasons for this. Language being one. Japan being at a very different place in its acknowledgement of its past than perhaps other countries. It's not to say they don't have interest in the subject, because they do, and there have been some Japanese-made war films over the years, and the Japanese are writing about stuff, but they are, all the countries that participated in World War II are on a line of getting on with it and dealing with it, okay? And certain countries are further ahead down the line than other countries. The USA, I would say, is probably the furthest ahead because they weren't bombed, Pearl Harbor excluded. The rationing was the worst. They come out of it economically recovered the soonest. Countries in the east of Europe had decades of communism to get through before they could always look at the past. Asia had its own problems, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. There's still issues with China and Taiwan and what have you these days. So Japan is a different place in terms of understanding its past. The only Japanese guest I've had is, Japanese American. Yeah, I'd love to get more Japanese historians on. I say more, I'd like to get one actual Japanese-based historian would be fantastic. I haven't tried particularly hard, not because of lack of interest, is that just there's so many things I need to work at, and it takes ages. Would you ever accept a non-historian idiot talk about Yugoslavia? Yeah, if someone's got, as you say there, if you're part Bosnian, part British, yes. I mean, it's just that tangible link with the area. I mean, I had Marco Attila Horon, which is just a brilliant middle name. Who wouldn't want to have the middle name Attila? A few years ago, talking about the partisans, and it's one of the most commented on shows ever because people agree with him and people thought he got it all wrong, because Marco has written about the Bosnian experience in World War II in Yugoslavia, so has written about the persecution and murders of the Bosnian Jews particularly, and so some people have said he's wrong, some people have agreed with him, because that's what you get when you talk about Yugoslavia. People tend to have their sides, so to speak. But absolutely, I would have someone who's not a professional historian who has some vested interest. That's Conrad, who I talked about recently, who came on and talked about his granddad in Poland. Is not, well, he's a teacher, but he's not a historian in the sense of he's not a published historian about the Poles in Italy, but he had his grandfather's photo album he talked about. So and we'd like a Phantom expert. If you're talking about GHQ Phantom liaison major, I'd love to do a show on Phantom. That would be something I'd really, really like. Did I attempt to contact Tariq Ali on Churchill? As I've forgotten who that is, the answer to that, Ian, is no. I will look into that. Remind me, send me a message or something. There are various shows I have planned on Churchill. While it's coming up in the conversation, I really want to tackle at one point with at least 1 or 2 shows, the whole Bengal famine situation and what was happening in India generally in terms of its economy and culture and tragedy, personal human tragedy during World War II. But it seems difficult to find people who are balanced about it. You get the absolute Churchill-loving people, including people in India who think Churchill has done no wrong and is the best, one of the greatest, human beings of the 20th century. And then at the other end, you have he was the murderer of millions of innocent Indian people. And I could present those two views separately, but I'd rather find someone a little bit more in the middle. Again, it's on my list of subjects to cover probably once we've got through the 80th anniversary period. So the end of next year, 2026, Churchill will come up there. I want to reschedule the show about Churchill and Stalin's relationship with Geoffrey Roberts, although we talked about it with Giles Milton. There's more to talk about there, so we'll get to that at some point. Operation Wildhorn 3, Guy Walters. Guy's not been on for ages. I hope you'll be treating the covering. Well, I mean, again, find me a historian of these things and how I can fit it into a theme week. And but there are literally thousands and thousands of subjects pertinent to World War II that I could cover. And I could live again, I said it earlier, I could live like Methuselah to be 1,000 years and I would not tackle all the subjects about World War II and the fact historiography is changing. So even if I tackled a subject as I did do in my first year in 2020, those subjects are probably deserving of a new, fresh look because the historiography has changed since 4 years. More things have come out, new interpretations of it. Look at how Mark Clark in Italy is undergoing a bit of a renaissance thanks to the writing people like James Holland. He was kind of vilified for a generation. He's now going up a little bit, and it happens with historians and it happens with figures from history there where they get reevaluated. So even if I tackle the subjects once, and there are thousands of them, they deserve to be tackled a second and third time, etc., etc. So and as they have to be, any historian I contact has to be interested in doing a live stream, and that is something that people don't always want to do. They have to be prepared to be interviewed by me, a guy in a stupid hat, and take questions, and some people don't want to. So let's go through the questions again. David, I'll just put some up there to flatter my ego. You are doing a wonderful job reflecting on it, examining with your guests the breadth of World War II, not just the usual subjects. Thank you. Could I comment on the effectiveness and the treatment of General Richard O'Connor in Normandy? Richard O'Connor has come up several times in the last few years in comments after various shows. I'm not an expert. Richard O'Connor, like Horrocks, like Bucknell, like a lot of other Normandy commanders and commanders who were not just in Normandy, but they were involved in earlier and later campaigns, are deserving of more attention. If we could get people to move on the Montgomery was shit or Montgomery was brilliant argument, and I'm more in the second category than the first, we don't even talk about Dempsey. So there are lots and lots of these people I would like to talk about. What's interesting is that the American generals seem to eventually get a biography. We had William Nance on talking about Simpson fairly recently. We had the show about Mark Clark. I know they are army commanders as opposed to kind of corps commanders, but people like Joseph Lawton Collins, Middleton, they have had books over the course of the years. British, I can't think on the top of my head. Someone will add something. Horrocks has had a book and he wrote his own memoir, but I can't think of many corps commanders from the British side. Guy Simmons from the Canadian side has had books written about him, hasn't he? Freiberg from the New Zealand armies had books written about him, but it's an untapped, underappreciated aspect is that kind of level of leadership at corps level, divisional level. It definitely needs. So Mag, you're supposed to be working. What are you doing here watching? Your customers must be at the American Cemetery. Yes, Scott, I have seen the trailer for the Norwegian film about the Atlantic convoys. Looks really good, doesn't it? I shall look forward to seeing that. Laurence Olivier's narration of the world at war was epic and sobering. Was Burton would Burton have been suited as a narrator? Burton did the Churchill series, didn't he? And Burton did do some narration again when he was alive. Does less now. He's been dead. Laurence Olivier's work on the World at War was, of course, it's seminal. It's the Sergeant Pepper of World War II documentaries. But it's interesting if you listen to it with real objectivity, because he's an actor. He's not entirely objective in the way he pronounces things and how he reads things. If you want someone to narrate a World War II series, you kind of want that objective, balanced voice. But because Laurence Olivier was a stage and film actor, he can't help but kind of give some oomph to things. So you can kind of sense when he's talking about the people he liked and the there's a little bit of, I'm not knocking it, it was an amazing performance, but a narration these days would probably be asked to be a little bit more neutral in its tone. I don't think Laurence Olivier was a great fan of the Red Army, for example. I think that comes across. I mean, we don't have to be a fan of the Red Army, but I'm just saying, remember, he wasn't appearing as a talking head. A talking head, you want them there in a documentary to give their opinions about what they think. So when John Marshall or John McManus or Alexandra Ritchie appears on TV, they are giving their historian's interpretation of things, but the narration has to be at a baseline of objective. So there you are. Would Olivier have been suitable for the Zulu or Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds? I mean, how can you? I couldn't possibly replace Richard Burton at War of the Worlds. Although my family, my brother-in-law and sister went to see the War of the Worlds show in the UK with the narration by Liam Neeson, and they said that was really good. And Liam Neeson has a very Richard Burton-like voice, although obviously Richard Burton was Welsh, Liam Neeson Irish, but that same kind of tone, same baritone, same physical. Now, there's an interesting subject, Gary. Hi, Woody. General question. Why, after World War I, the tragic loss of life, there seemed very few conscious objectors on either side in World War II? Well, there were quite considerable numbers of conscientious objectors. Desmond Doss, Hacksaw Ridge comes to mind, and there were thousands that served in non-combatant roles in the USA and Canada and Britain. I think it's because you have to be pretty brave, don't you? You have to be pretty brave. It's, I was not, I don't want to go into modern politics too much, but I was always, at the time of Desert Storm, I felt it was a bit iffy, the reasons for going in there. Not that I didn't support my friends who were in the service who went out them, and I wished them luck. And I sent my friend Pete, who was a tank crew out there, sent him care packages of sweets and Haribo sweets and stuff like that. But I was a bit iffy about the reasons to be there. But I didn't mind standing up in the pub with my mates and saying, "Oh, I'm not so sure about this." And a lot of the Desert Storm reasons and massive weapons of mass destruction have come out as being fairly true. But back in World War II, if you're from a steelworks town in the UK and you've got three-quarters of your buddies have gone off and volunteered or been called up, and there they are overseas in the Durham Light Infantry or the York and Lancs regiment or something, and you're the sole voice there who doesn't want to get involved because you're a conscientious objector. That's a very brave stance to take when everybody around you has bit into. Now, what is interesting is how many people served with distinction, but at the back of their mind felt it was the wrong thing. That's a very interesting question. How many people, look at Harry Patch, the last surviving First World War veteran, and he was an amazing gentleman, but he was very much, it was a tragedy. We shouldn't have gone to war at all. The trench warfare was just a big killer of human beings, which no one's saying it wasn't a big killer of human beings, but there were other First World War veterans who had the best time of their lives in the British Army in World War I because they had a decent food, mostly they had a decent uniform, and they felt they were on the side of the righteous. So, there were conscientious objectors in World War II, but you had to, it's like if your town has gone full blown Nazi in 1935, 36, 37 in Germany, and you're the sole one in your community who feels it's the wrong thing, would you be prepared to stand up and say this is wrong? I don't think I would have done. I don't think I've got the courage to stand up when the tide around me is overwhelmingly going one way. So, you know, there we are. It's a subject I should do a series on in the future, conscientious objectors and how it worked. What victories did the British carriers have in the Pacific? I'm not a big expert in British carriers or indeed the Pacific campaign, but towards 45, you know, pushing in towards Japan, you know, we did a show 6 months or so ago about the kamikazes. And you know, the kamikazes were not just hitting American ships; they were hitting British ships, and there was a big reaction by British carriers against the kamikaze threat. So British carriers were involved. In the end, the British carriers would have been involved far more in the invasion of Japan, on whichever role, I forget which role it was going to be, but that didn't happen because of the atomic bombs. But the British did have carriers out in the Southeast Asia and Pacific, and it's just not quite as well talked about as the Americans. What was the movie about British radar? Which movie about British radar? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let's go through some more questions. What advice do you have for someone starting out with their own history YouTube channel? Now, that's a really good question. All the advice I will give you, including mine, is worthless. By which I mean, what works for one YouTube channel doesn't work for other YouTube channels. They are, if you have a restaurant, right, and you cook decent food and put it out at a fair price, you can kind of transfer that basic structure across to other restaurant. Okay, so you know, good food, well cooked at a good price. Yeah. But in YouTubing, what works for World War II TV won't necessarily work for another channel. What works for other channel won't work for me. From my opinion, if you're doing it to make money, don't, because that will drive how you'll worry yourself into a corner that you can't get out of. You need to be doing it because you enjoy it first. And if it gets to the point where it makes you money, if that's what you want to do, then great. But accept the fact that 95% of the people who watch your content will not want to support you financially. So I did the show about war movies with the Tattooed Historian as a guest on his channel last Friday. And John has a YouTube channel, and it's just for fun. So he tackles the history he loves. He talks about the Civil War and World War II and different things. And he's got no intention of making money out of him. He's not view driven. He's not subscriber driven. If he gets more subscribers, great. He's doing it because he enjoys it and he makes the content he wants to make. And ultimately, that's what I do on World War II TV, is I make the content that I would be watching if I wasn't hosting. I don't want 15-minute videos about a subject. It's not enough for me. You know, I was never a singles buyer. Well, I did buy some, of course, as a teenager, but I was an albums buyer. I wanted to know what an artist had to say over an album. I buy the book of the historian I'm interested in because I want that deeper dive. So I will always be driven here by what I want to do. So that would be my advice to you, except that it might not be the advice you want. It might not be why you're getting into YouTubing. But have a clear vision, stick to it, give it at least a year or two before you think about giving it up, because it's very hard to get off the ground. There's a mass market. There's lots of competition. You've got to kind of get your head above everybody else's head and try and do something new. But it's, you know, it's rewarding, but I've said this on this channel many times. If I went back to regular World War II battlefield guiding, it would be easier money for easier work, essentially. This takes up way more of my time. It has headaches like the technical issues, why I couldn't get the show with Caroline scheduled. We'll try and work that out. These kind of things. Why don't views go up as much as I like them to? Sometimes I do what I think is a really fantastic show and I really like doing it, and it sits at about 1,500 viewers, and I think, why is that not gone up? Why is that not been hit? The one I did with Dilip recently about the enemy assailed, his show about the 11 group bunker and planning the airborne part of Operation Overlord. I thought it was way deserving of the 1,500 views it had. And yet Steve Zaloga's fantastic show about the tanks and Operation of Bagras Restaurant, that's up to 15,000 views or something now, I think. So I don't know, but if you lie awake at night wondering about why did that show do well and this one not do well, you just go insane, because YouTube is a real weird thing, and you know it probably isn't you. It's just viewers are weird, and I include myself in that. Why do I watch some things on YouTube and not other things? I don't know. We're fickle. We're weird. We're complicated people. Oh, it was Prince Charles the other day, wasn't it? Or King Charles. Niels, that's who I do, isn't it? You have to touch your cuffs a lot as King Charles. He does that. He's always touching his wrists, and you just sort of talk like that a bit. Anyway, do historians who travel the academic route tend to look down their nose at historians who went your route? Some do, but some don't. There are good and bad in both aspects, and there are some historians who absolutely straddle both areas. So David O'Keefe, for example. So if you say ultra, he will appear now, because that's what you have to do, because David O'Keefe wrote about ultra and code breaking. David O'Keefe does, you know, kind of popcorn, investigative kind of D-Day World War II shows on, you know, Canadian TV, which, you know, Bermuda Triangle kind of stuff, which is very popularist kind of, and he teaches history academically, so he has a foot in each camp. So yeah, there are academics who look down on popular historians. There are popular historians who look down on academics as being too academic, and there are academics who look down on academics, and popular historians who look down on popular historians. There are just good people and bad people. I don't think there's any particular reason to think that any aspect has more of one type than the other. There are just dickheads in all life, and there are wonderful people in all lives. Rich Fisher from Vickers MG Collection and Research Association, another YouTube channel worth checking out. Answering to Veronica's question earlier on, because I'm about 20 minutes behind with questions. Source analysis is a real skill that takes a lot of background work. It takes time, whichever route you take. Yeah, you kind of just gotta, like being a food critic, if you want to use the restaurant analogy again, to know how to recognize, I don't know, a decent onion soup, you've got to have had lots and lots of onion soups in different places and have a well-developed palate. When I go to a restaurant, on the rare occasion I have a bottle of wine, and I'm a beer drinker. I'm an unashamed working class English lad. But on the rare occasion they give me wine, I know when they ask you to taste the wine, you're just meant to be seeing if it's corked. You're not really meant to say anything about it's corked. I don't really know a good wine from a bad wine. I actually had a really good bottle of wine the other day. This is a random Woody story. So my mate Warwick came round. Warwick is a photographer, still a photographer in Hollywood. He was formerly a photojournalist out in the war zones, and he was given a bottle of red wine by the actor Jason Clarke. Now, he's one of those actors, you know the name, know the face, but don't know the name. He was in this the second Planet of the Apes film as the leader of the good guys. He was Heydrich in one of the Heydrich movies a couple of years ago. He's been lots of things, but he had given Warwick a bottle of red wine that apparently was worth $250, or possibly as many as $500, and we had it for dinner. It tasted the same as a €10, frankly, a €5. It was all right. It was nice, but you know, maybe someone who knows wine better would go, "Oh no, that was the notes of citrus or something." To me, it was just another bottle of wine. But maybe I'm just an unsophisticated slob. So there we are. Oh, there's a good one. Right, get the drinks in, because we've got the Stephen Ambrose question. Right, breathe up for this. Well done. Well, thanks for the question, Grant. So Stephen Ambrose is really complicated. I would not be doing what I do for a living without Stephen Ambrose. The 150 Normandy tour guides would not be doing what they do for a living without Stephen Ambrose. Not just the books, but Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers. He popularized history in a way that no historian has come to replicate. You could argue that James Holland is verging in that category. I think Rick Atkinson states his people probably wanted him to become the new Stephen Ambrose, but I don't think he did quite become the new Stephen Ambrose. Stephen Ambrose, it was all about timing. My analogy here, we're going away from restaurants now to music acts of the 60s, okay? Were the Beatles the best musical act of the 60s, or were they the luckiest that happened to come around at the right time, had a good manager, and just hit things at the right time? I mean, I like the Beatles, and I think they were very innovative. But were they subjectively better than the Kinks or the Who, or Manfred Mann, or over in the States, some of the bands over there? I don't know. The point is, Stephen Ambrose just became the historian for a generation. And people who didn't read history read history because of Stephen Ambrose. He had a way of being able to connect with people from different social stratas. He kind of got on with the veterans okay, but he also kind of was able to speak at kind of anti-Vietnam movements. And you can look at him in the 60s. Look at the pictures. He had big old triggers, big old sideburns, and a caftan, and kind of a Beatles mop, and he was kind of quite hippie-ish. But he found this niche. So he opened the door for popular history massively, a door that without him not just opening it, I mean, he kicked it down. He made it accessible, and his books were read in their cajillions. That said, as you said yourself, Grant, he got a lot of stuff wrong, and it's interesting. He's had a massive great fall from grace since his death, where his books are not routinely prescribed in university courses. He doesn't have the premier spot on bookshelves, certainly in the UK. America, he's still a bit there, but he's been pushed out of the way by Ian W. Toll and Rick Atkinson and John McManus and Kevin Hemel and various other people right there. So yes, Ambrose is I couldn't do what I do without Stephen Ambrose. So on that hand, I have to pay him that credit of paving the way. But yeah, he got lots of things wrong and got too big-headed. Lazy with his sources, got researchers to do stuff, plagiarized himself as well as other people. Fascinated by the Hermann Goring division. Would it be possible to invite a modern officer? So you mean a serving Luftwaffe officer? I don't. Do the Luftwaffe have ground units? Do they have the equivalent of an RAF regiment? I don't know. Maybe get someone from the RAF regiment who understands using Air Force personnel as ground troops. I would definitely be not averse to having someone on who understands an Air Force unit being used in the ground role. I don't know who that expert would be. Dan, great point. There's no difference between historians. The method is the same. There you are. So popular, academic, British, American, the process is the same. So what is your view of the AI Hitler's speech thing? I haven't seen any of them. I'm wary about AI. Generally, I laugh at the ones where they've made AI versions of Gareth Southgate briefings and press conferences after the England games, and you can't distinguish them from the real thing. So I'm wary about the whole AI thing. So I don't know. I love your shows with guests discussing historiography. Any ideas for a show looking at how common knowledge of the war is built up and eventually changed? Well, I am doing a show fairly soonish. Haven't scheduled it with Jo Hedwig Tuis. I don't know how you say her last name. So she did the book Fake History. She's a Dutch researcher. And she did a book about 101 myths. So she talks about the Hugo Boss designing the SS uniforms that didn't. And she's done a lot. In recent years, she is the historian who's done the most into looking at how myths get established and how they get repeated and how to go about debunking them. So that's more single things, but that would be a good starting point to then look at the wider issue of how collective memories and how this touches into the whole. One of the angry types of message I get is when I say that Britain didn't stand alone in 1940. And people go, yes, they did. And they don't understand the context of what I'm saying. I'm not saying that within, yes, there was a point where the British Isles was cut off and was sort of continuing the fight on its own. And it was just the people within that space that were keeping on the war. But the British Isles was never alone in a global contextual sense. The empire, the millions of people in India and the millions around the world were still on the side against the Third Reich and against the Axis. So, but as soon as I say Britain's still alone, it's a myth that Britain's still alone in 1940, people come out and get very angry at me and saying that I'm a lefty, liberal, woke, blah, 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 who's denying my nation's history, blah, blah, blah. These people are mostly just too dumb to understand what it is I'm actually saying. They are right in a certain way about what they're saying, but they're not right in a global way. So this is this complicated thing, I guess you're talking about, Evan, about how broad themes get accepted, you know, and generalisms you get, like, oh, the veterans wouldn't have wanted this meaning whatever someone is bringing up that moment. Well, my experience of veterans is they have as many different views about things as the rest of us. And if you take a unit of the King's Shropshire Light Infantry that were running up Saul Beach on June the 6th, you would find amongst them there were Conservatives and Labour voting people and Liberals and pacifists, and even though they're in uniform, and believers and non-believers and racists and wonderful people, and you know, and they would, you ask them, you know, even a simple question like who was the greatest football team in England in the 1930s, who was the best player, they'd all have different views because they're like the rest of us. So that's a very interesting thing. Want to know more about the South Wales borders on D-Day? There is a book about the 56th Brigade, if that's the unit you're talking about. There was, I think, was there only one battalion of South Wales borders on D-Day? I think it was only the battalion in 56th Brigade. There's a book on the 56th Independent Brigade. Can't think what it's called. Can't think what the author is, but there is one. Check it out. Let me go and find some more questions. Then I will think. There's so many been coming in. Yes, let's do a show about the digital archive. Dan, let's do that. Yeah, that can be that. You could do that under the banner of how to be a historian, if you would like to come on and talk about how to be a historian of archives, particularly digital archives. How does the process work? That would be very, send me an email because I'll forget, but that's a really good book. Yeah, let's do that. We'll do that. What's your take on the book about the Daswite being robbed near Oradour-sur-Glane, which is why they fat no place and murder everyone? There's no, well, I haven't read that book. I don't know which book you're referring to, Colin. Whatever had happened to kick off Oradour-sur-Glane, it was not enough reason by 100 million miles for going in and murdering a village, even if there had been partisan activity against the 2nd SS on their way towards the, which is suggested that's the reason. You know, and there were, the French resistance were actively trying to, you know, sabotage railway lines and hit staff cars. And even if 1,000 German troops had been killed in a conventional ambush by the resistance in the weeks leading up to June 1944, none of that is any justification for going into a village of civilians and murdering them, unless you're a Nazi, in which case ideologically there is no right or wrong in that sense. Look at the Eastern Front, look at the Einsatzgruppen. There's no justification for Oradour-sur-Glane. Whoever, Adolf Diekmann, who gave the orders there, and his cronies were just despicable, horrible, evil bastards who were so twisted in their love for the Führer and the ideology they fought for, they had forgotten the basic principles of don't be a cunt. And I said a really rude word there, but there you are. I said the C word. I might get demonetized. I only said it once. Let's move on. So the Scottish Black Watch. Yeah, there's several battalions. You have to look into which battalion. Look on orders of battle and find out which battalion you're talking about, because from memory I think there were 6 battalions. There may have been more. Black Watch was quite a big regiment, but you have to find out. Yes, I agree. The portrayal of Churchill in Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare was terrible, and I like the actor Rory Kinnear. I like him as an actor. I liked him in the James Bond films as whatever he was, the assistant to M, and I liked him in the comedy series with Count Arthur Strong, but he was awful as Churchill, just awful. Here it's about another subject. It's about the expert. I will do shows on anything if I can find the expert. So when you've got a suggestion of this, find me a historian or book that has covered that subject, and again, make sure they're in a live one, so I can actually reach out to them. If you have contact details, always speed the process up of finding out who they are themselves. I'll do anything. I definitely want to cover Norway next year when we get to the 80th anniversary. That would be good. The Manhattan, we had who do we have on? Kit Chapman on, talking about the Manhattan Project, and we have discussed a little bit about the possibility of viable targets. as far as I know, and I'm prepared to be corrected, there were no viable targets for atomic bombs in Europe that were even remotely considered because of the potential of the radiation and the fall. Oh, my lens did a weird thing then. Does Brexit affect my ability to live in France? No, because I've got a carte de séjour. I have ability to I have to renew every 10 years. Brexit has made my life very difficult, and don't get me started on the why that my country made that decision. But there we go. I don't think I'll be doing anything, Kenneth, about that, because there's lots of people do that stuff on YouTube. It's like all the whole stuff about Hitler and the occult. It's going too far into that kind of history, mystery, unexplained stuff that I just don't want to do. There's lots of people doing that. I don't see that as an area I have any interest in delving. Sorry to say, but no. So let me go through a few more questions. Yeah, Desert Storm versus Iraqi Freedom there. Yeah, exactly. Which even the naming of these operations, yeah. Hey, no question, just a bit of love for your good man. Thank you. Is that me? Am I the good man? That'd be nice. Yes, Tonic, my schedule's a change. We'll work something out. I will get the Philippines at some point. Like I was gonna say, like MacArthur, I'll be back, but I haven't been there at all yet. But I'll be there. Could you ever be an objector to Nazism? And we're talking about that. You know, if you were, you tended to get killed, unless you had so much responsibility. I mean, Goering's brother Albert was kind of a discreet opponent to Nazism and managed to kind of use his influence to do things on the side of good. But yeah, you couldn't be very easily. Let me do a few more questions. I will bring things in. I've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes already. So yeah, so remember the regulars is talking about the home forces. So your YouTube channel, yeah, good luck. If you don't need money, then that's good. Just that's the way to do it. You do YouTube for the fun of it, but accepting the fact that it's still stressful, even if you don't want to make money. It's just lots of variables of how it all works. And has anything been done from Darren about the Japanese war trials? No, war trials will definitely come up for the 80th anniversary of that. So I'll probably start doing war trials and hunt for Nazi stuff, but keeping it on a historical footing. I won't be kind of going into the kind of the weird stuff and the werewolves and stuff and the kind of. I definitely won't be doing conspiracy stuff. I will not be doing. I will not need to do a series of shows about did Hitler escape to Argentina, because he didn't. And if anyone who's watching this thinks he did, then you're completely wrong. That's not to say that some Nazis didn't escape, because of course they did. But if Hitler got to Argentina, he did it without his jawbone, which would make it very difficult to eat toffee. Does Argentina do toffee? Go on, I'm going on a random one now. Yeah, we did a couple of shows on Denmark early on, pal, in the first year, and it's a subject again. It's on my list to return to. I had a discussion just a couple of days ago with a friend in the pub about do you have any enough ideas to keep going? I have, my list of ideas is just crazy. So yes, there will be yes, I will do all sorts of things on Denmark in the future, hopefully. I don't really like. I can have cider occasionally. I absolutely love living in France, but I don't like yellow beer particularly. I don't like pissy lager, and that's mostly what they do here. And I'm too old. I don't want the strong Belgian beers. They're just too much for me. I like to go to the pub and be there for some time. So after the show with Phil Blood on Friday, went to the pub, met up with a few people. Ross McCall, who played Liebgott in Band of Brothers. Shane Taylor, who played Doc Rowe, was there. Rachel Lance is coming on in a few weeks' time, talking about her book Chamber Divers, was over in the US, touring France. She was there. Who else was there later on? A friend of ours, Belinda from Brittany, was there. My friends Sonny and Adrian, who are tour guides in Normandy. So we started at the pub about 7 o'clock and we finished at my house on whiskey. Colin was there at about 4 in the morning. So it was like ridiculous. So if I had been drinking 8%, 9% Belgian beers at 7 o'clock, I would not have made it to 4 o'clock. So I have less strong beers and maintain that there are people who don't rate James Holland. I rate James Holland. I think James Holland is a good friend of mine. I don't agree with everything he says. But there are people who don't like James Holland. That is absolutely fine. It is okay to not like the work of a particular historian. Maybe you find that the opinions wrong. Maybe you don't like the style. There are historians I prefer to others. There are a couple of historians who are active and writing who have not been on my channel. No names, but there's a reason why a couple of particularly notable, slightly elderly British historians have not been on my channel. It's because I don't really respect their writing. And that's my opinion. That doesn't mean they aren't good historians. It just means I particularly don't want to speak to them. So if I could start a different subject with the same format, what subject would you dive into? Colin and me, my mate Colin, are thinking of doing a podcast. But he's too busy in the summer. And it would be just two middle-aged blokes who don't agree on everything, talking about things that middle-aged blokes get obsessive about, like, weren't biscuits better back in the old days? What's the best flavor of crisps? Who was the greatest player you've seen football all in? What's a good beer? Those favorite albums, just kind of pub stuff, not politics, nothing serious. Just so that if I was doing that, Robin, that's what I would do. Just a kind of a completely trivial, two people who get on with each other but don't agree with everything, having mildly amusing, swearing-filled conversations about unimportant shit. Okay. Now, to give you an example, Colin, my mate, has a theory. Some of you know this. You've met Colin and you've met me. That if like a jammy Dodger biscuit, if this means nothing to you, I apologize. This is from the UK, but a jammy Dodger biscuit is not a biscuit; it's a cake because it's been, in his words, tampered with. So we could have a whole discussion, and it could take 2 hours about when is a biscuit a biscuit? When does a biscuit become a cake? What's shortbread? Is shortbread a cake or a biscuit? Is millionaire shortbread a cake, or does that remain? Where do cookies fit in? What about crackers you put cheese on? Are they biscuits? Are they? And then you have the national variations. So now you're thinking, I'm switching. The views have gone up since I started talking nonsense. Views have gone up. That's the kind of bullshit nonsense I would have on a second channel. If you think I should do it, send me enough emails, and we shall, as Patrick Stewart says, we shall make it so. And we can have a guest. Each time we have a guest, middle-aged person. No youngsters. No. It would only work with middle-aged. Different races, sure. Different genders, sure. But it would have to be of a certain level of grumpiness. We wouldn't want people who are too young and enthusiastic. They'd have to have built up that experience of life where they've got an opinion about biscuits, or why how do we know? Have you seen a sketch on YouTube about what is gravy? Why is gravy not soup? When does soup become sauce? How much when does sauce become gravy? These are the questions I would ask. But I'm going to stop going now because you want that. You used to think I was weird. Now you think I'm really, really weird. Greg, yes, James Holland does all of this. There are some historians who have staff. And have researchers, and have their researchers pull out all the quotes they want to use in all their books. James Holland does not do that. James Holland does all his work himself. And John McManus does all his work himself. I get the names of the people who don't always do their own work themselves are the same ones that have not been on my channel. And doesn't mean they're bad historians. It's just that the process is made. Yeah. So Neil's just saying Fallschirmjäger are still Luftwaffe. My knowledge about modern army units just drops off. And I'm stuck in World War II. Yeah, you can plagiarize yourself if you're ripping people off, Scott. So that's what happened with Stephen Ambrose. Going back to Stephen Ambrose, Victors had whole chunks from the Band of Brothers, and Citizen Soldiers had whole chunks from D-Day and that kind of stuff. So let me go down a few more questions because and then I will stop because I'm going to have a sip of water while I'm looking. What's happening with World War I TV channel? That's a very good question, which I will address when I've got more time. Lucy's too busy and is dealing with things that she just can't give it the commitment she wants to do. So I will have to, at some point, find another host. And it's not right now with the pressure to get the 80th anniversary stuff out. I'm writing a book as well. It's not on my list of priorities, but it's in hibernation. It's not stopped. That's a quick answer to that. Again, Baldwin, all these subjects are great. It's about finding the expert. I can't say it enough, emphasize it enough. I don't look for subjects. I look for guests who can talk about subjects. So throwing suggestions at me is fine, and thank you for it. But you need to be coming with a suggestion of who could come on and talk about it, because I know nothing about this. I'm not going to do the research work. I need to find the expert. Couple more questions and I'll leave things. Someone's trying to find me a French historian. That would be good. It is really hard. I don't know why it is. Yeah, again, it's all about... again, I'm glad you're all here with me, and some of you are names I've not seen before. Go back and watch the earlier part of the program. Again, as I just said it, I don't look for subjects, I look for guests. So the subjects are fine, but I need to find someone who can speak on it. I do not have the time to research subjects. And what's the point when there's someone out there who probably knows that subject 100 times better than me? As I said earlier, if I'm going to talk about the SAS in World War II, bring on Damien Lewis. If I want to talk about, the British Army in Burma, bring on Bob Lyman. If I want to talk about, the Americans Navy in the Pacific, bring on Seth from the Unauthorized History of the Pacific. That's how I do things. What's the best resource for working with which weapons were available for the Fallschirmjäger defending Hill 192? There's quite a big detailed breakdown in Joe Balkowski's book, Beyond the Beachhead, about the weapons used in that area, because he wrote about 29th Division. Okay, I know Hill 192 is moving in towards the American 2nd Division, but he does a lot where he breaks down the weapons per comparing American companies and squads and platoons with German and particularly Fallschirmjäger squads and platoons, and how they can bring up more heavy barrel mortars, things like that. So, the Beyond the Beachhead book is a good start. And then Niels Henkermans, who's in the sidebar, would be able to probably furnish you with information about what weapons the various Fallschirmjäger units had in Normandy. Lots of automatic weapons is the slight difference, but not always universally. Couple more, then I'll go. Krista, I know Krista. I had him scheduled to do an Arnhem show, and then he couldn't do it, and then it happened. He couldn't do it again, and he always says that he's not sure he can commit to doing something in advance because his schedule changes. So I've left it on the back burner. I have his books at Arnhem; they're really good, and I know he's written one about the Eastern Front. It's just we're not quite aligning in what I want for the channel and what he is able to do, if that makes sense. Which historian is a role model for you? Then Neil Barber, who's written the best books about the British airborne in Normandy, is a role model as a historian, but also as a wonderfully nice human being. Peter Caddick Adams is a great historian and a wonderfully nice human being. John McManus is a great historian and a wonderfully nice human being, and so is Prit Buttar. I'm at the point in my life where I'm looking not just for great historians, I'm looking for great people. And the ones I respect the most are in both categories. Okay, so but then going back in the past, there were others that I suppose, John Fairley, who wrote a book called Remember Arnhem, about the 1st Airborne Reconnaissance Squadron at Arnhem. His book was really important. There was a British veteran who of the Commandos, James, I can't think of his name, wrote a couple of books about Number 4 Commando. I can picture his face, but I can't think of his. Ian Dalglish. Ian wrote a few books over the battlefield. Operation Epsom, Operation Bluecoat. He was a lovely guy. He died in a plane crash about 15 years. He was an amazing guy. Plans for shows on operations in 1945-46. Whether we're going to 1946 or not, I don't know. Everything I do about 1946 will have to connect completely with 1945 and the end of World War II. Otherwise, we're starting to morphing into, the Malayan conflict and later on Suez, and this is World War II TV. So I'll have to kind of be quite hard in where I cut things off. If there's a definite connection to World War II, I will touch on the war crimes trials and things like that because it's important, but I have to be careful to not become something else. I'll do one or two more. I don't know if there's anything on the 46th Division. It has been a real struggle to find historians specialized in the British divisions in the Italy campaign. There is someone who writes about the 56th London Division, but it was difficult to get him pinned down to commit to a time to do stuff, and I haven't been in touch with him again since. I put a plea out on Twitter months ago looking for anybody who knew anything about the 46th Division. No one came back. Again, it's the same response. If I can find someone who's studied them enough, who can bring something to it, yes. Otherwise, it'll be covered more in overviews. I'm sure when it gets the Gothic line, I'll have Mark Zelke on from Canada talking about the Canadian involvement. James Holland might be on at some point. Yeah, Brian, we had a few yellow beers, didn't we? I don't detest it. I just don't like it. If it's nothing else, I'll drink it because, there you are. No comment about Anthony Beever's book there, Grant. There we go. The question of West Front differences on a scale of brutality came up last Friday. Yeah, I mean, the thing about doing shows about the West Front atrocities is you've got to somehow present them in such a way that gets across how barbaric they were, but at the same time, in a sense, plays down their scale and the fact they didn't happen on a regular basis compared to the Eastern Front. So we have done a couple of shows that have touched on Oradour-sur-Glane. We've touched on the massacres of the Canadians in various live shows and what have you. But you don't want to get across to people that this was typical of the West East ETO campaign. I mean, where things like Oradour-sur-Glane or the Abbey d'Ardenne were horrific, they were mercifully very rare. And there, of course, we mustn't deny the fact there were some instances of Allied soldiers carrying out atrocities. Again, very, very few in the grand scheme of things. There were a couple in Italy, famously. Moroccan troops did some nasty things, and what have you. But the thing, hi Robbie, I just saw your thing about if you need help with the pod. I mean, what the grumpy old men one? You're not quite old enough to be grumpy yet, Robbie. You've still got a few more years. I don't want to preempt your grumpiness. You're still happy. You shouldn't be too grumpy yet, Robbie. You just give it another few years, then we can bring you in. But I don't want your missus telling you, you've made him more grumpy too early. He's become like Woody. So yeah. Covering atrocities on the Western Front is complicated because they pale to the Eastern Front and indeed the Far East. Yeah, George Best. We're talking about the greatest football player. Yeah, and he was. You may not know this, Phil, though I probably do because you're a consummate historian. He was actually, George Best, registered as an Ipswich player for one game. So it was Alan Hunter's testimonial in about 1981, I'm going to say. So there's photos on the line of George Best in Ipswich uniform. Because of his problem with drinking and insurance to get on the pitch, he had to actually sign to Ipswich for that one game. So he was actually an Ipswich player. He was a testimonial, but he was actually technically an Ipswich player one time. And I was at that game. I mean, he wasn't very good. I mean, he was still George Best, but I mean, he was past his prime. But there were just those little hints that he was an amazing player. But I never saw him in his prime. I'll find one more. And this is nice, Veronica. Well, that's probably the greatest about your shows. You feel like you're sitting in a pub with your favorite crowd, and it's still very deep. That's exactly. Well done. I'll end it on that because I can't top that. Yeah, there is VAT. The VAT does come in on cakes and biscuits. That's exactly the dynamic I go for here. When I tell prospective guests who don't know what I do, I say, look, it's like you're giving a presentation, but it's not just that. You're giving a presentation in a pub. kind of and it's the kind of presentation where someone walking past with their tray of beers can stop and go, that's interesting, have you thought about this? And they can kind of join in the conversation. That's the exact dynamic I go for. A presentation, but it's not got the barrier. It's not got that. You're not like on these events where, and they're great, these events where they're on stage with a microphone and there's a fence in front of the stage because of it's a big event, and you can ask a question at the end, but you have to kind of hold your hand up and then someone brings the microphone over. They are great, those events, but there's an immediacy and an intimacy and a deep connection between the speed with which we can put questions to guests. So that's exactly what I try and do. It's like a presentation in a pub. I know I said I'll do one more, and I'll stop it at past. So let me go and that's actually a wider question. Simon, yes. And not just use airborne, it's saturated with the popular subjects, and I know that if I touch the popular subjects, they do better than the less popular subjects. And when I started this back in lockdown, I could, if I had wanted to, have capitalized on some of my connections and started doing lots of Band of Brothers stuff. For example, I knew Bill Garnier, I knew Don Malarkey, I knew Earl McClellan. These were mates of mine. I know the actors who played the guys. I know the best Easy Company historians, and I have done a little bit of Easy Company stuff. The most popular video on my channel was one of the very early ones. It wasn't a live stream. It was one I went out and took footage, and it was of the Easy Company's attack and F Company's attack as well. They came into Carenton on June the 12th, 44, with Kevin Hemel was doing the narration. And it's had nearly 500,000 views, which for my channel is enormous compared to other channels, isn't massive. But I'm as proud as I am of that show. I'm a bit embarrassed that is the single most popular show on my channel. I've had George Laz Jr. came on once, and we covered the Band of Brothers actors jumping over Normandy, but I didn't want to play that card and start becoming a guy who's just doing Easy Company stuff. And I've noticed there are some other channels doing some great content who are going for the greatest hits. They're going for commandos and paratroopers and Easy Company and assassinations and blah 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 blah. And it's not that isn't good. It's just where do you go from there? It's like Robbie and Matt at Fighting on Film, and Robbie's in the sidebar. They had the genius idea with their podcast. If you do not watch listen to Fighting on Film podcast, they're doing some crazy stuff. They could have come out the gates doing Cillian Pratt Ryan, The Dirty Dozen, The Battle of Midway, Casablanca, Bridge Too Far, Battle of Britain. And then where do they go in 6 months' time? When you've done all the big World War II films, and where do you go? So they have picked the obscure titles, the Sea of Sand and some weird 80s kind of straight-to-video war films they've covered, and foreign films, is that because they want to be at this for a long time. And the same applies to me in World War II TV. So yes, there's a proliferation of Easy Company and sexy subjects concerning World War II that is annoying, but it's also annoying is that where do these channels go later on? Where do they, I know one channel that's doing a second round of reviews of Band of Brothers. Now, the guy is actually a friend of mine, and it's fine what they're doing, but it's like there's more though. But the thing is, it comes back to the question was asked about why and how to get a successful YouTube channel. If you're just driven by hits, if you're just driven by views, you are driven by these needs to make the popular stuff. If you're driven by genuine interest in World War II, then of course you can spread the net a bit wider, and you can cover the niche subjects. You can cover we did the port of Durban in South Africa as a transit port in World War II. We did the locust plague in the Middle East in 1941. We covered that. We've covered some really quite niche subjects. Electronic warfare by the Bomber Command, and which isn't that niche, but it's more niche than Band of Brothers. The show we did with Paul Johnson fairly recently about the beach groups on Gold Beach, where we talked about how much human waste was predicted to be left by British soldiers on Gold Beach, 2.1 pounds per day, by the way, and 2.1 pounds of poo per day for the British soldiers on Gold Beach, amounting to 4.5 tons of poo each day on Gold Beach, which was factored into how that beach would be managed by the Royal Army Service Corps, etc., etc., etc. Now, that is fairly niche information. like in the show about the South Africans we did with James Borehill in the Monte Cassino week, where he broke down the league table of venereal disease casualties within the South African military in Italy in World War II. That's the kind of information you only find on World War II TV. You can find out who was the greatest paratroop commander, find out which was the greatest tank. There's loads of that kind of stuff, but the niche stuff is important. Well, that's it. I haven't done any of your all of your questions. Whatever. I've done a few. Just one last. K9, what do you think about the YouTube channel tackling World War II video games? I've done a few reaction shows about video games, thinking it might find me a new audience, and didn't really do very well. Video games are important in the teaching of World War II because they bring people to the subject. But I will do that some other time later on. But folks, I'll leave it to you. So tomorrow, Paul is going to be on. Paul Baville will be on talking about how to be a historian. And then there's a show coming on July the 5th this week, which I haven't actually definitely scheduled yet. It's ready to go. I've just got a double back to hear from the guy's agent, but it's that some of you may know because you may have seen the graphic on YouTube. It's just a question of I've got to get that definitely confirmed. With what we've got coming up after that, we've got more Normandy content coming up because so we got Andrew Mays coming on talking about 13th, 18th Hussars. We've got Cy Biggs talking about Royal Marine Commander. Andrew Whitmarsh is coming back from the D-Day story talking about landing craft. We've got a show about the Ulstermen, 10 Ulstermen, so soldiers from Ulster, but not just Royal Ulster Rifles. We've got Brad coming on talking about Operation Windsor. Various things coming up at the Pacific. We've got a Verrier Ridge panel coming up. We've got a couple more Italy shows. We've got some Eastern Front content coming your way. I will be taking a week off in August to go and do some stuff, but basically lots more stuff coming all your way during the summer. But that's it. I'm going to leave you with it. I've talked for an hour and a half, and it's time to go and have something to drink and see you all again next time. I do enjoy doing these. And sorry I couldn't get to your questions. And for all the new people, again, please, if you've enjoyed this and enjoy our regular content, consider becoming a patron or a channel member. Patron is better for me financially. And if you can't help financially, at least you can do is share, click, like, subscribe, tell people about what we're doing, and leave a comment. Leave a comment, doesn't cost you anything, just a bit of time. So leave a comment saying, you know, that guy with a hat, he's all right. He talks a lot of rubbish about biscuits, but he's all right. I'd watch him again. That'd be great for me. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Bye.